They told me to ask my daughter for money. My own son had $12 million sitting in a bank account, and his mother told me to go ask the school teacher instead. That's the kind of sentence that sits in your chest, like a rock you swallowed whole. I didn't say anything back to Caroline that night, 58 years old, and I just sat there. But I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. This isn't a story about money. Not really. It's a story about who shows up when you've got nothing left to offer them. Let me back up. I live in a little 3-bedroom house off FM 762 in Rosenberg, Texas. The kind of house you buy when you're young and think you're going to flip it into something bigger someday. Never happened. The paint's peeling on the porch rail, and I've been meaning to fix that gutter on the east side for 2 years now. It was a Tuesday evening in late July, hot enough that the cicadas hadn't even bothered to quiet down after dark. And I was sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of mail I didn't want to open. Past due notice from CenterPoint Energy. A letter from the insurance company that I already knew wasn't good news, because good news doesn't come in an envelope that thick. Caroline's phone rang from the counter. I watched her whole face change. I mean, it changed like somebody flipped a switch behind her eyes. There it is, I thought. The only smile I get to see anymore. And it's not even for me. Richard, honey. She practically sang it. Oh my God, tell me everything. I set my coffee down. Is that Richard? Let me say hi real quick. She didn't even look at me. She turned her back. Actually turned her body, like I was a draft coming through a window she needed to shut, and walked toward the living room. A $12 million account. Richard, I am so proud of you, honey. I really am. You know, you get that mind for business straight from my side of the family. Your grandfather could sell ice to an Eskimo, God rest him. I sat there and listened to my wife of 31 years talk to our son like he just cured cancer instead of a closed sales deal. I'm not saying that to be bitter. I'm saying it because it's true, and because you need to understand what normal looked like in my house before I tell you what happened next. She hung up eventually, still smiling, walked back into the kitchen, and the smile dropped off her face the second she looked at me like she'd taken off a mask. He's doing so well, Boris. That's good, I said. And I meant it. Whatever's happened between me and that boy, I never once wished bad on him. Caroline didn't say anything else. She just slid the CenterPoint bill across the table toward me. Didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't ask about the cough I'd had for 3 weeks that I kept blaming on the Gulf humidity. Fix this, she said. Please. Before they cut it off again. Again. Like it was a pattern. Like I was the pattern. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Get comfortable. This story is going to take you somewhere. Hit that like button and drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to love it here. Now, here's the part where I'm supposed to make myself look better than I am. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you the truth. Because the truth is worse than anything I could make up. And it's the only thing that matters here. 10 years ago, I wasn't some deadbeat who gambled away the family's savings at a casino in Louisiana. I was a real estate investor. A small one. Nothing fancy, but I was good at it. I bought 60 acres of raw land out past Simon. Land that was going to sit right in the path of the Grand Parkway expansion. Everybody said I was smart. Caroline used to brag about it at church. Then, an old pipeline under a neighboring property ruptured. Crude oil bled into the water table before anybody even knew it happened. My land, 60 acres I'd sunk everything into, got locked under a federal cleanup order before I ever broke ground. Couldn't sell it. Couldn't build on it. Couldn't do a damn thing with it, except pay the property taxes and watch my credit score circle the drain. Banks pulled my lines of credit. My business partner walked, and Caroline never once asked me if I was okay. She asked me how I was going to fix it. That was 10 years ago. I've been driving a forklift at a distribution warehouse off Highway 36 ever since. 6 days a week most months, coming home, smelling like cardboard and diesel. And somewhere in there, my son turned 21 and decided his whole young adult life had been ruined because his daddy couldn't afford his junior year spring break trip to Destin. He's never forgiven me for that. Not once. Not even after I explained what happened. In his mind, I gambled and I lost, and he paid for it. Maybe he needed a villain. I used to think. And I was standing right there. My daughter's different. Melissa's 26, teaches 4th grade, over at a school in Katy, about a 20-minute drive from here. She was 16 when the oil spill happened, old enough to remember the house we used to have, young enough that she watched me rebuild something out of nothing, instead of just mourning what we lost. She came by 2 nights after that phone call with Richard, carrying a foil pan of chicken and rice. My favorite, the way my own mother used to make it, heavy on the cumin. And she didn't say a word about money or bills or Richard's $12 million. She just set the pan down, kissed the top of my head, and said, "You still coughing like that, old man? It's just allergies, baby." Uh-huh. She didn't believe me. She never did. "You're seeing Dr. Ferris Thursday. Don't argue with me." I didn't argue. Wasn't much point arguing with Melissa. She'd inherited her stubbornness from somewhere, and I had a suspicion it was me. Dr. Ferris wasn't smiling when he came back into that exam room. "Boris, I'm not going to sugarcoat this." He set the folder down like it weighed 40 pounds. "The mass on your lung, it's operable. That's the good news, but it needs to come out soon. Weeks, not months." There it is, I thought. The other shoe. "Okay," I said, "because what else do you say?" "So, we schedule it." That's when the woman from billing came in. Nice enough lady name of Becky, looked about as uncomfortable as a person can look, and told me my insurance had a gap in coverage for the specific procedure Dr. Ferris wanted to use. Out of pocket, before they'd even put me on the schedule, $30, $500. "I can look into a payment plan," Becky said. "But the surgical team needs the deposit before they'll book the operating room. Hospital policy, $3,500. You want to know something funny? I used to make more than that in a single week, back before the spill. Now, I sat in my truck in that parking lot, A09 Silverado, the act barely holding. And I did the math about 6 different ways, and every single time it came out the same. I didn't have it. My credit was still garbage from the land debt. No bank in Fort Bend County was going to touch me. $3,500, I thought. And I've got a son with $12 million sitting in an account somewhere. I told myself I wouldn't call him. I told myself that for 2 full days. Then I called him anyway, because that's what a father does. You swallow your pride, and you call your son, and you hope, God, you hope that he's still in there somewhere. He picked up on the 4th ring, and I could hear it right away. Glasses clinking, somebody laughing loud, a woman's voice saying something about a bottle of Macallan. "Dad, hey, can this wait? We're at Perry's, celebrating the Hendricks account. Richard, I need to talk to you about something serious." "Yeah, okay. Give me a sec." Muffled sound like he'd covered the phone then. "All right, go." I told him all of it. The mass, the surgery, the gap in coverage, the $3,500 I needed by the end of the week or they wouldn't schedule me. There was a pause, a long one, long enough that for 1 stupid second, I thought, maybe, Dad. His voice went flat, cold. "I just spent 10 years digging myself out of the hole your bad investments put this family in. You know how hard I worked to get where I am, and now you want me to throw my commission back into what? More of your bad planning. Richard, this isn't about the land. This is surgery. This is gay. You brought this on yourself, Dad. You always do. Ask the hospital for a payment plan. That's what their 4-day pause. And then quieter, meaner. I've got a reputation to protect now. Dad, I can't keep carrying your dead weight." The line went dead. Just like that. My son hung up on me while I was sitting in a hospital parking lot with a death sentence in my chest so he could get back to his scotch. I called Caroline next, told her everything, asked if she could talk to him, maybe soften him up. "Don't you dare ruin this for him," she snapped. "He worked hard to get away from all this, from your mess. Emma's got a stable job, doesn't she? Go ask her." Emma, she meant Melissa. After all these years, and she still called our daughter by the wrong name when she was too busy being angry to think straight. I hung up, sat in my truck in that parking lot for a long, long time. Didn't cry. I was past crying by then. Just sat there, thinking about how a man could work his whole life to give his family everything and end up alone in a Silverado outside a hospital doing math that never came out right. I met Melissa at a little diner off Highway 90 2 days later. The kind of place with vinyl booths and a waitress who calls everybody hun. I hadn't planned on telling her. I really hadn't. I was going to smile and eat my catfish and let her think everything was fine. She knew before I said a word. She always knew. "Dad," she set her fork down. "What's wrong? Tell me right now." So I told her, and I want you to understand. I was ashamed. Ashamed to even be sitting across from my 26-year-old daughter, a school teacher who couldn't have more than a few $1,000s to her name, about to ask her for money her own brother had turned down without blinking. I didn't even get the words out. Didn't even finish the sentence. Melissa reached into her bag and set an envelope on the table. Then she turned her phone around so I could see the screen. A notification from a payday loan company. Approved, $1,500. "Dad, stop talking." Her eyes were wet, but her voice wasn't shaking at all. "There's $2,000 cash in there. I sold the Civic this morning." "Melissa," my throat closed up. "You sold your car?" "Cars can be replaced, Dad." She reached across the table and grabbed my hand hard. "The way you grab something you're not going to let go of. You can't. I'm taking the bus to school for a while. It's fine. I probably need the exercise anyway." I sat in that booth and wept in front of a waitress named Grace and half the lunch crowd at a diner off Highway 90. And my daughter, the one who didn't have $12 million, the one nobody ever bragged about on the phone, held my hand across a Forakica table and told me I was going to be okay. She's the only one who ever saw me. I thought the only one who ever really saw me at all. I had no idea sitting in that diner just how much that moment was about to matter. I had no idea what was still sitting out there on 60 acres of dead land, past Simon waiting on me. But that's the next part of the story. Stay with me. A letter showed up at my daughter's apartment while I was still healing from surgery. I almost couldn't afford, and it was worth more than every dollar my son ever refused to give me. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I did. I sat with it for 3 days before I told a single living soul. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to the morning of the surgery first, because you need to understand what it cost me to get to that letter. They wheeled me into pre-op at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday in early August, and the last thing I remember before the anesthesia took me under was Melissa's face. Right up close to mine, her hands squeezing my fingers. "You're going to be fine, old man," she said. "I already told the nurses you're stubborn as a mule. They said that's good. Stubborn people heal faster." Where'd she learn to be this brave? I thought 26 years old and steadier than I've ever been in my life. Then the lights went out. I woke up 11 hours later with a tube down my throat and a pain in my chest, like somebody parked a truck on it. Dr. Ferris came by that evening, still in his scrubs, and I remember him leaning down close so I could hear him over the monitor beeping. "We got it all, Boris." Clean margins. "You did good." I didn't cry. I didn't have the energy to cry. I just laid there and thought about Melissa's car, sitting on some dealer's lot with a different family's name on the title now. And I thought, she bought me this. Not the hospital, not the insurance company. My daughter bought me this with a $1,500 loan and a car she needed to get to work. I'm going to make this right, I told myself. However long it takes. I don't care if I'm 50, 80 years old. I'm going to make this right. I had no idea how soon that promise was going to come due. I spent the next 2 weeks recovering on Melissa's pull-out couch, because my house was empty most days. Caroline hadn't so much as texted to ask how the surgery went, and I wasn't about to lay up alone in a quiet house, listening to my own breathing machine. Melissa's apartment was small, 1 bedroom off Grand Parkway near her school, the kind of place where you can hear your upstairs neighbor's television through the ceiling. She taped her bus schedule to the refrigerator with a Katie magnet right next to a photo of the two of us, from some 4th of July picnic years back. I looked at that bus schedule every single morning. Every single one. She's out there, waiting on a city bus at 6:40 in the morning. I thought, because she sold her car for me and Richard's driving some leased Audi to a steakhouse to celebrate a bonus he'll blow through in 6 months. That thought sat in my chest, heavier than the surgical scar. She'd come home from school every afternoon, still in her teacher clothes, smelling like dry erase markers and cafeteria pizza, and she'd check my incision, heat up something simple for dinner. She wasn't much of a cook, my Melissa, but she tried, and she'd sit with me and watch whatever cop show was on. And never once, not one single time did she complain. Never once did she bring up the car. Never once did she ask when I was going to pay her back. That's the difference, I thought, watching her fall asleep, sitting up on a kitchen chair one night, still in her work clothes. Richard gives because he wants credit. Melissa gives because she doesn't even think about it as giving. It's just love to her, plain and simple. It was a Tuesday, 16 days after the surgery, when the mail carrier knocked, instead of just leaving it in the box. Melissa was at school. I answered the door in my robe, still moving slow, still tender across the ribs. "Got something certified here," the carrier said. "Need a signature. 2 letters, actually. One from an outfit I didn't recognize at first, Cornerstone Golf Development, and one with a return address I knew instantly because I'd been getting mail from them for 10 straight years. United States Environmental Protection Agency. Here we go. I thought, another update. Another 6 months of nothing. Another form letter telling me the cleanup's still ongoing. Don't touch the property. Don't build. Don't sell. Don't breathe near it. I almost didn't open it right there. I almost just set it on the counter and went back to the couch. But something made me sit down at Melissa's little kitchen table and tear it open right then. I read it twice, then a third time slower, because I didn't trust my own eyes. Remediation status complete. Site released from federal oversight, effective July 14th. Complete 10 years. 10 years of property taxes on land I couldn't touch. 10 years of my credit sitting in the gutter. 10 years of my own wife looking at me like I was a stain on the family, and it was sitting right there in black and white. Done. Released. Clean. I set that letter down on the table, like it might go off if I moved too fast. Then I opened the second one. Cornerstone Golf Development. Turned out, while my land had been sitting locked up under a federal order, the Grand Parkway expansion I'd bet everything on 10 years ago had finally happened, right past my property line. 60 acres that used to be worthless swampland with an oil stain under it were now sitting less than a half-mile from a brand-new interchange, zoned commercial, surrounded by exactly the kind of growth I'd predicted a decade too early. The letter was an offer, a real one signed with numbers behind it, not some lowball feeler. $15 million cash 30-day close. I read that number probably 20 times. I want to tell you, I whooped and hollered and ran around that little apartment like a crazy man. I didn't. I sat very, very still. $15 million, I thought. And 3 weeks ago, I was crying in a diner because I couldn't come up with $3,500. I looked up, and my eyes landed right back on that bus schedule on the fridge. Katie is Magnet. My daughter's handwriting in the corner. Art 4640 Mem. Because she'd had to memorize a whole new commute at 26 years old to save her father's life. She's out there right now, I thought, standing at a bus stop in this Texas heat, and I'm sitting here holding $15 million. That's the moment something in me went quiet and cold and very, very clear. I didn't call Caroline. I didn't call Richard. I want you to remember that, because it matters for what comes later. I never hid this money from anybody. I just didn't see one single reason to tell people who'd already told me in their own words that my problems weren't their problems. Why would I call them? I thought when 3 weeks ago they made it real clear whose problem I was. I picked up my phone and called somebody else instead. Larry Foster, the voice on the other end, said, "Larry handled my business affairs back before the spill, one of the only professionals who stuck around after everything fell apart. Mostly because I still paid him what little I could on time, every single time. Larry, it's Boris. Boris, good Lord, how you feelin'? Melissa said the surgery went. Larry, I need you to look at some paperwork for me today if you can. Something in my voice must have told him this wasn't a check-in call. What's going on? I told him all of it. The EPA release, the cornerstone offer, the number. There was a long pause on the line, long enough I thought the call dropped. 15 million, he finally said. Boris, that changes everything. I know it does. I looked at that bus schedule one more time. That's exactly why I need you to pull something else for me first, before we do anything with this offer. You remember a document Caroline had you draw up about 5 years back? Larry went quiet again. The property and liability separation. The one Richard pushed for. That's the one. I remember it real well, Boris. I told Caroline at the time. I didn't love the idea, but she was insistent, and it was her legal right to protect herself, given the debt situation. He paused. You want me to pull the original? I want you to pull it, and I want you to tell me exactly what it says. Word for word. Don't leave nothing out. Because if I remember that document right, I thought Caroline didn't just protect herself from my failures. She signed away every single claim to whatever came next, good or bad. Larry called me back 2 hours later, and I could hear papers shuffling on his end. Boris, I'm going to read you the operative language here. Caroline Hunt hereby waives, releases, and forever discharges any and all present or future marital claim, interest, or right, legal or equitable, in and to the real property located in Fort Bend County, described herein, including any proceeds, appreciation, or value realized there, regardless of cause. Regardless of cause. Larry, I said, real slow. Does that partition and exchange agreement mean what I think it means? It means exactly what we drew up. Boris, 5 years ago, she wanted the family house and her retirement protected. So, she partitioned the estate. She took the house as her sole separate property, and she forced you to take 100% ownership of that debt-ridden land as your sole separate property. It was legally binding the day it was notarized. Whatever happens to that land now, good, bad, or a $15 million buyout, she signed away every single legal claim to it. Richard was the one who pushed her to do it, wasn't he? He was the one who set the meeting up. I almost laughed, except nothing about it felt funny. Told his mother it was smart. Told her it'd protect her credit if the land ever got seized for my debts. Well, Larry exhaled slow into the phone. Son of a gun, sure was smart. All right, just not in the direction he thought he was being smart. I sat there at Melissa's kitchen table, with the afternoon sun coming through those thin apartment blinds, and for the first time in 10 years, I felt something in my chest that wasn't shame and wasn't grief. It was clarity. Larry, I want to move on the cornerstone offer. Quiet. I don't want a single soul outside this call knowing about it till it's done. Not even Caroline. Not even Richard. Especially not Caroline and Richard. I looked over at Melissa's bus schedule one more time. You draw up whatever needs drawing up. I want the sale closed, and I want a trust set up right alongside it. Irrevocable in Melissa's name. Larry didn't say anything for a second. All of it. Boris. The whole 15 million. Every dime after my debts get paid off. My voice didn't shake, not even a little. And that surprised me more than anything else that day. She sold her car for me. Larry, she took out a payday loan at some ungodly interest rate so I could have surgery. She's been riding a city bus at 6:40 in the morning for 2 weeks straight so I'd have a place to heal. I stopped. Had to. My throat had gone tight. Meanwhile, my son told me to ask the hospital for a payment plan, and my wife told me not to ruin his big celebration. So, no, I'm not splitting this 3 ways for the sake of looking fair. Fair already happened. Fair happened in a diner off Highway 90 3 weeks ago, and only one of my children showed up for it. I hear you, Boris. I'll have the paperwork ready by Friday. One more thing, Larry. Yeah, don't put my name on the deed for the house I'm going to buy her either. Trust owns it outright. I don't want there to be one single piece of this that anybody can argue about later. I want it airtight. You understand me? Airtight, Larry said. I understand completely. I hung up the phone and sat there a long while in that quiet apartment, listening to the hum of the window unit, looking at that little bus schedule stuck to the fridge with a school magnet. They're going to find out eventually, I thought. And when they do, they're not going to come here asking how I'm feeling. They're going to come here asking about money. That's just who they are now. Maybe who they've always been. I wasn't wrong about that. I want you to hold on to that thought, because it's exactly what happened, but not the way I expected, and not for the reason I expected. See, I thought Richard and Caroline would show up because they'd heard about the land. They didn't know a thing about the land yet when they showed up at Melissa's door 8 days later. They showed up because Richard was drowning in a mess of his own making, and he needed money so bad he was willing to walk right into the one place he'd sworn he'd never have to set foot in, his broke, embarrassing father's temporary bedroom on his sister's pull-out couch. He had no idea what he was about to find waiting for him there. Neither did Caroline, but I did. I'd had 8 days to get ready for it. If you have been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button while you're at it, and be sure you're subscribed. My son walked into my daughter's apartment ready to threaten me with divorce lawyers and frozen bank accounts. He had no idea I was the one holding a document that had already frozen him out 5 years before he ever showed up. 8 days. That's how long I had between hanging up with Larry and hearing that first hard knock on Melissa's door. 8 days to get my paperwork in order, sign what needed signing, and sit with the strangest feeling I'd had in a decade. Patience. That didn't hurt. I want to tell you I spent those 8 days plotting some grand speech. I didn't. Mostly I just healed, walked a little farther every morning, sat on Melissa's little balcony in the evenings, and watched the sun go down over the parking lot, thinking about 60 acres of land that had finally, after 10 years, stopped punishing me. Then that Wednesday evening came, and somebody pounded on the door like they were trying to knock it off the hinges. "Dad, Dad, open up! I know you're in there," Richard's voice, loud, frayed at the edges in a way I'd never heard before. Not the smug, satisfied Richard from the steakhouse. Something else was under it now. Melissa got there before I did, still in her school clothes, and pulled the door open with a look on her face. I recognized the same look she used to give kids in her classroom who were about to get sent to the principal's office. "You want to explain why you're pounding on my door like the police," she said. Richard pushed past her without answering. Caroline right behind him. And I want you to picture this. My son, 31 years old, in a wrinkled dress shirt with his tie already loosened, sweat on his collar, even though the act was running. My wife behind him, arms crossed, face set hard. Neither one of them looked at me and asked how I was healing. Not one word about the surgery. Not one word about the scar still tender under my shirt. "Dad," Richard's voice cracked, just slightly right in the middle. "We need to talk now." There it is, I thought. Not "how are you feeling?" Not "I'm sorry I hung up on you in a parking lot outside a hospital." Straight to business. "Same as always. Sit down, Richard," I said. "You look like you're about to have a heart attack of your own." He didn't sit. He paced. "I was looking through the Fort Bend commercial registry today," Richard said, his voice shaking. "Cornerstone Golf Development just logged a deed memorandum. A 60-acre parcel out past Simon. Your dirt, Dad. They flagged the title history because of the waiver Mom signed 5 years ago. $15 million cash. You sold it, didn't you?" Caroline's mouth actually fell open. 15. Boris. Is that true? So that's how they found out, I thought. Not from me. From a commercial registry. That's almost funny, in a sick sort of way. "It's true," I said, calm as I could manage. "Closed 9 days ago." 9 days, Richard's voice climbed. "You've had this for 9 days, and you didn't call me your own son." I looked at him for a long moment before I answered. "Last time I called you, Richard, you were at Perry's celebrating a commission while I was sitting in a hospital parking lot, trying to figure out how I was going to pay for surgery. You told me it wasn't your problem. So, no. I didn't feel the need to call you the second something good happened either. That should have been the moment he softened. It wasn't. You hid this from us. Richard's finger came up, jabbing toward me like he thought that would make his words truer. You knew the cleanup was finishing. You knew that land was about to be worth something. You made us live like we were broke this whole time. Mom drove a 10-year-old Camry. Dad, a 10-year-old Camry, while you sat on a fortune, just so you could hand it all to your favorite kid the second it paid off. He actually believes that, I thought. He's rewriting the whole thing in real time, right in front of me, and he believes every word coming out of his own mouth. Richard. My voice came out quieter than his, which somehow made the room go quieter too. I didn't know that land was worth a dime until 16 days ago. I found out sitting on your sister's pull-out couch, recovering from surgery she paid for. You want to talk about hiding things? I didn't hide a fortune from this family. I hid the fact that I was scared for 10 straight years because every time I tried to talk about it, your mother told me to fix the bill and you told me I ruined your 20s. Caroline stepped in then, arms still crossed, chin up. Don't you dare stand there and act like the victim, Boris. I stood by you for 31 years while you dragged this family through the mud with your real estate disasters. That money belongs to this family. You are being vindictive. You're being cruel. You're being stingy. Richard finished for her. You're being stingy, Dad, and it's disgusting. Stingy. I almost laughed out loud at that one. A man who refused his father $3,500 for cancer surgery, calling his father stingy. Over $15 million. We're not asking anymore, Richard said. And here's where his voice really changed. Dropped low. Mean, the voice of a man who thought he was about to win. Mom's filing for divorce tomorrow morning. Irreconcilable differences. Financial abandonment. The works. My lawyer's already drafting a motion to freeze every account connected to that sale until the courts sort out an equitable division. You hid marital assets, Dad. That's not a gray area. That's fraud. He slammed his hand flat on Melissa's kitchen table, the same table where weeks earlier she'd slid an envelope of cash across to me without a second thought. You're going to be tied up in litigation. So long you won't have a cent left by the time we're done. My lawyers will bury you. Melissa's face, I thought, glancing at her. That's my daughter's kitchen table, and he just slammed his fist on it like he owns the place. I looked at Richard for a long moment, then Caroline. Then I stood up, slow, careful, still tender across the ribs, and reached into my jacket pocket. You want to talk about lawyers, Richard? I said. Let's talk about lawyers. I pulled out 2 folded documents, slid the first one across the table to Caroline. You remember this, Caroline? She looked down at it, and I watched the color start draining out of her face before she'd even finished the first paragraph. 5 years ago, I said, you and Richard sat me down at my own kitchen table. You were scared, genuinely scared, that the bank was going to come after your assets because of my land debt. Richard's idea, by the way. His brilliant idea. He told you it was smart. Told you it would protect your credit if the debt ever caught up with the property. I tapped the paper. So, you signed this. You had your lawyer draft a partition and exchange agreement. You took the house and your accounts as your sole separate property, and you legally forced me to take 100% of the land and all its liabilities as my sole separate property. Read it again, I said, gentle as I could manage, because there wasn't a drop of satisfaction in me watching her hands start to tremble. It doesn't say debt, it says regardless of cause. You didn't just protect yourself from my failure, Caroline. Under Texas law, you converted that land into my separate property. You signed away any future claim to its value, regardless of cause, just to keep your hands clean of my debt. Your own lawyer explained it to you, and Richard signed as a witness. Richard's face had gone pale too, but he still wasn't done. Never was that boy. That doesn't matter, he snapped. I'll still take you to court. I'll on what grounds, Richard? I slid the second document across to him. Take a look at this before you finish that sentence. He looked down. It was a bank statement. Melissa's bank statement. $12. I said, "That's what's in your sister's checking account right now." $12, Richard, because 3 weeks ago she sold her car and took out a payday loan at 22% interest so I could get on an operating table. While you were ordering $300 scotch to celebrate a commission, your sister was riding a city bus at 6:40 in the morning so she'd have gas money to get to a job that pays her $41,000 a year, teaching fourth graders how to do long division. I let that sit in the room for a second. You want to talk about court, son? Go ahead. Bring your lawyers. Bring every lawyer in Fort Bend County. But before you do, you go ahead and explain to a judge how you plan to claim a share of assets. Your mother legally waived in writing 5 years ago on your own advice. Explain to that judge where you were the night your father needed $3,500 for cancer surgery and where your sister was. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Just the window unit humming, and somewhere upstairs, a neighbor's television bleeding through the ceiling like it had every night for the last 3 weeks. I didn't hide this money from you, I said, and my voice finally came down soft, tired, done. I found out about the land's release sitting right here on that pull-out couch. Just over 2 weeks after surgery, it took 30 days to close the sale, and the trust was finalized last week. I didn't hide this to be petty, Richard. I kept it quiet because I needed time to ensure the money went to the only person who actually earned it. But I want you both to understand something. Even if I had known sooner, even if I'd had months of warning, it wouldn't change one single thing about this moment. I looked at Caroline first. Then, Richard, you two divorced yourselves from this family a long time ago. You just hadn't gotten around to the paperwork yet. The trust is already finalized, I said. Irrevocable. The full $15 million goes to Melissa. All of it. The very first thing Larry did this morning was wire transfer a payoff to that predatory lender to burn your payday loan contract to ash. Next, I paid off the title on this apartment complex so you don't owe a dime in rent while your new house is being finished. I funded the tutoring program she's been trying to start for kids who can't afford it. She's got a car waiting on her, nicer than the Civic she sold, though she's going to fuss at me about that. I folded my hands on the table. You're both officially free of my mistakes now. Isn't that what you wanted? For 10 years, I heard about how I ruined this family with my failures. Well, congratulations. The failure's over. And it turns out, the two of you signed yourselves right out of everything that came after it. Caroline's mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in longer than I could remember, my wife didn't have a single word. Richard just stood there, jaw working, staring at that bank statement like it might rearrange itself into different numbers if he looked hard enough. Get out of my daughter's home, I said. Quiet, final, both of you. They left in a silence I'd never once heard out of either of them in 31 years of marriage and 31 years of raising that boy. No slammed door, no last word. Just two people walking out of an apartment, realizing in real time that the very cleverness Richard had always been so proud of, the legal maneuver he talked his own mother into, was the exact thing that had locked them both out of a fortune neither one of them would ever see a dime of. Melissa stood in the kitchen doorway after they'd gone, arms wrapped around herself, watching me. Dad, her voice was barely a whisper, you didn't have to give me all of it. Yeah, I said. I did. I walked over and put my arm around her, careful of my ribs, and we stood there a minute, in that little apartment that wouldn't be hers much longer. Not because she was losing it, but because she was finally, getting more than she ever asked anybody for. Cars can be replaced. I remembered her telling me months before, sliding an envelope across a diner table. You can't. She'd been right about that. Turned out I couldn't be replaced either. Not to her. And in the end, that was worth more than any number Cornerstone Golf Development ever put on a piece of paper. We stood there, in the quiet, my daughter and me, finally safe, finally free. And somewhere across town, my son sat down that night to figure out how he was going to explain to his firm's partners that the $12 million account he bragged about wasn't nearly enough to save him now. and there wasn't a single soul left in his corner willing to bail him out. Funny how that works out. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I will see you on the next one.